Hi, really quick before we start the video, I just want to say thank you all for being here. If you liked the video, hit that subscribe button and hit that bell. And also, this review will be spoiler free, so you are safe here. Thanks for watching. Enjoy. Spider-Man 2, baby! Woo! Spider-Man 2, Electric Boogaloo. 2 spider, 2 man. 2D Spider-Man in your mouth. Wait, what? Ah, fuck it. Let's just get into it. Marvel's Spider-Man was developed by Insomniac Games as a PS4 exclusive and was released in 2018. Upon release, it was met with near universal acclaim. Reviewers said it felt like this was the game Insomniac was built to make. After all, Insomniac specializes in fluid movement animations, tight combat, and cohesive character-based storytelling. Their 2 most recent games prior to Spider-Man were Sunset Overdrive and Ratchet & Clank, both of which showcased these strengths to a T. While there's no doubt that Insomniac nailed the gameplay of Spider-Man, in my opinion, they clearly had some room for improvement in regard to the open-world activities and the writing of their characters. While some characters such as Peter and MJ had new and interesting things to do, in the case of Doc Ock and Norman Osborn, it felt like we were repeating the same things done in other renditions of the character. In 2020, Insomniac released a smaller-scale follow-up to Spider-Man titled Spider-Man: Miles Morales, which released as a cross-generation exclusive for PS4 and PS5. As the title suggests, Miles Morales puts you in the shoes of teenage Spider-Man Miles Morales. This served as a nice juxtaposition to the more mature adult Peter Parker we played as in Spider-Man 2018. Miles Morales had a tighter, more personal, and smaller scale story that served to develop Miles more as an individual and show us who Miles is when Peter isn't around. We didn't know it at the time, but with Miles Morales, Insomniac was getting us ready for what they were set to reveal next. In September of 2021, about a year after the release of Miles Morales, Insomniac revealed Spider-Man 2. The title of the game served as a bit of a double entendre because Insomniac also revealed that in this game, you would be put into the shoes of both Peter and Miles. Upon hearing this, I was very excited. To me, it sounded like the perfect blend of the things I loved about both Spider-Man 2018 and Miles Morales. To have a story centered around both of these characters, the Peter and MJ dynamic and late 20s Peter that I loved about the first game, but also the family dynamics and personal growth arcs that typically come along with any Miles Morales story, sounded like a match made in heaven. The only problem with this concept would be the concern of biting off more than you can chew. Centering a narrative around 2 characters with different struggles and in different phases of their life can sometimes leave one of them getting the short end of the stick. On top of that, the marketing of the game showcased 2 major villains, Venom and Craven the Hunter. In fact, the more I heard about Spider-Man 2, the more nervous I got that Insomniac wouldn't be able to properly juggle all of these story threads and would end up repeating the mistakes of the amazingly terrible Spider-Man 3.
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
However, I decided to put my faith in Insomniac. After Spider-Man 2018 and Miles Morales, they've earned a bit of leeway in my book. So that brings us to last Friday, October 20th, which saw the release of Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 had the potential to retain the things that worked in the first game and do away with and adjust the things that didn't. Did Insomniac succeed? Well, I didn't buy 19 inches of Venom, but I did buy the game. I did not get a review copy, so therefore I have skin in the game here just like all of you. So let's just dive right into it. The game opens without wasting time. Quickly, we are shown the major struggles that both of our Spider-Men will be dealing with over the course of the next 15 to 20 hours. Miles is getting ready to graduate high school from Brooklyn Visions Academy, and thus is being thrust into the stressful process of college applications. A process that's even more intensive if you're planning on being an arts major, which Miles is. As someone who's been through the process of applying to an arts program, I really related to this struggle. For context, I'm currently enrolled in a BA program for musical theater. Not to flex. Peter, on the other hand, is going through a much different struggle. Spoilers for Spider-Man 2018. After the death of Aunt May in Spider-Man 2018, Peter is a bit lost in life. He's in his mid-20s, isn't able to keep a consistent job, and is struggling to pay the mortgage for the house he inherited when May died. Peter's time is split between all of the things he wants to do, and it appears to the player as if being Spider-Man is holding Peter back a bit and stifling his personal growth potential. This is one of the smartest things Insomniac does with their writing of the character of Peter Parker. Time management is not a new struggle in the world of Spider-Man. In fact, it's one of the core tenets of the character. But by putting such an emphasis on how being Spider-Man is holding Peter back, Insomniac gets to dig beneath the surface and really ask the question, is being Spider-Man the best thing for Peter Parker? Especially when there's another Spider-Man out there to keep the city safe. After this story setup is out of the way, we are thrust into one of the coolest opening set pieces a game has ever shown me. When I said this game wastes no time, I fucking meant it. This set piece also paves the way for the introduction of our core antagonist, Craven the Hunter. This is where my first major problem with the writing of the game comes in. The introduction of Craven is shown through a flashback cutscene to 6 months prior to the start of the game. In my opinion, this cutscene is completely unnecessary and in fact, sort of stifles the pacing of the game. It introduces Craven too early in my opinion. I think Craven would have been much more interesting and intimidating if we didn't even know what he looked like or what his plan was until after Peter had already encountered him. This flashback scene felt like they were trying to give people who don't know the character a proper introduction and rundown on him. But, as someone who doesn't read comics, I really don't think it was necessary. On top of Craven, it's not long after this that the game introduces us to the character of Harry Osborn. Harry Osborn as a character showcases the strengths of the writing staff at Insomniac to an industry-leading degree. The way Harry is introduced to the story and the timing of it all is just so perfect. Also, a lot of Peter's early missions in the campaign aren't even as Spider-Man. It's just Peter and Harry shooting shit together, reminiscing about their high school days. The game really takes its time to establish the dynamic of these two characters and really get us to believe in it. This is also around the time that MJ gets brought into the story. In Spider-Man 2018, Insomniac took a lot of flack for the way they handled the character of MJ. MJ and Peter had been broken up for a while and were just starting to rekindle their relationship. On top of that, the game had a few too many shoehorned stealth missions that really didn't add too much to the experience. While it's not perfect here, the handling of MJ is much better. The Peter and MJ dynamic is much closer to something from the comics or the Raimi movies, and it feels authentic. There's also a moment with MJ towards the end of the game that I won't talk about again until the spoiler section, but it's my favorite moment in a video game all year. It's seriously jaw-dropping, like my jaw actually dropped and I was sitting in a room alone. Also, the MJ stealth missions are back, but this time they're short, sweet, and fucking hilarious. Instead of just sneaking past enemies and throwing rocks as a distraction, MJ is now fully kitted out with a stun gun, and it's just so fucking funny. She's running around these environments like she's fucking Solid Snake, just taking these guys out one at a time, capping Craven's goons. At first, it was just a little silly, but it didn't take me out of the game. But as the game progresses, these missions become more and more hard to believe until the last one where they just completely jump the shark. It was still funny though. Look, I understand the struggle Insomniac had of not wanting to make their female protagonist a damsel in distress. We've seen far too much of that, especially in the superhero genre. But I think there are plenty of ways to make MJ powerful that don't involve her going Mission Impossible on Craven's lackeys. After we get thoroughly introduced to Peter's circle of friends, we get reintroduced to Miles' confidants. There's Genki, who is really a highlight in this cast and has been super underappreciated in all of the coverage I've seen. He's funny, smart, lovable, and everything you would want from a trusty guy in the chair. My only problem with Genki is that he seems to be more technologically knowledgeable than anyone else in the city of New York. I mean, this guy is literally coding full-on AR Batman-style detective mode programs by himself on the fly. I know this is a superhero story and the audience needs to suspend some disbelief, but I mean, this is just insane. Like, how is this fucking dude the only guy in New York City that can hack into Craven's flying birds? He's 17! But I digress. Aside from Genki, there's also Haley. Haley is an artist who also attends school at Brooklyn Visions Academy. She is Miles' love interest in the game and serves to showcase one of the core struggles of Miles in the story, which is time management. He really cares about her and wants to spend time with her, but between Spider-Man, helping his community, and applying for college, he just has trouble making it work. Haley is also deaf and communicates through text-to-speech and ASL. This is some of the best disability representation I've seen in the medium of video games. None of it feels forced, and it's not a core element of her character or something that's overtly focused on, it's just a thing. I love that and would love to see more of it from other game developers. Lastly, we have Rio Morales, Miles' mom. Rio is a character I fell in love with in 2020's Miles Morales game, and I think the way she is utilized in this story is nothing short of perfection. She isn't underused or overused. She's just used effectively to offer humanity to both Miles and Peter when they need it. She also gives us a window into the community aspect of the character of Miles. As a councilwoman, Rio cares deeply about her community, and that attitude rubs off on Miles. There's a chain of side quests that involves Miles tracking down stolen goods from a museum in his community because his mom wants him to help out, and it's just so good, man. We get to see that classic friendly neighborhood Spider-Man stuff. The stakes aren't super high, the world isn't in jeopardy, it's all about Miles just trying to do good, and I loved it. To me, that's when Insomniac is hitting their stride, when they take a step back to focus on the smaller, quieter moments. There's a side quest you get at some point while swinging around New York that has you assisting a woman in finding her grandfather. He seems to have been missing for a few hours, and his granddaughter is racking her brain with the worst possibilities that come to her mind. As Spider-Man, you take it upon yourself to help this woman find her grandfather. You retrace his steps, and as you do, you learn more about this man and who he is. I won't say any more about this quest out of fear of spoiling it, but it's truly remarkable. It's quests like this that really show that Insomniac understand the character of Spider-Man. Spider-Man isn't the hero who will single-handedly take on the biggest threats in the world. He isn't Thor. Spider-Man is the hero who helps the average person with their problems and gets a bit more insight into their lives from it. While he does his fair share of taking down big bads, that isn't the core of the character. And when Insomniac showcases such a deep and intimate understanding of the nuances of the character, it makes it so much more disappointing when Insomniac gets something wrong. Okay, now I'm going to take a minute to talk about Craven a bit more in depth. Craven as a villain is a mixed bag. As someone who has no prior experience or core iteration of the character ingrained in my head, I was excited to get introduced to one of the most famous rogues in Spider-Man's gallery. What's on display here is not as cool as the character that Spider-Man diehards describe when they're talking about Craven. I can't talk too much about his role in the story right now at risk of spoiling anything, but I'll give a very basic rundown. Craven is on the hunt. Finding no satisfaction in the current prey in his home country, he treks over to the Great White Way in order to do a manhunt on many famous villains from Spider-Man's past, in order to see if any of them can best him. From what I understand, this part Insomniac got right. However, Insomniac commits a cardinal sin of writing here in my book. Until very close to the end of the story, we don't know why Craven is doing what he's doing. He's just doing stuff for the sake of doing it. For a long time, we as the audience are given no personal reason to buy into what Craven is doing. He's just a bad guy doing bad stuff with a bunch of bad guy goons and a bunch of bad guy tech. The game doesn't let us forget that he's the bad guy. In fact, Craven is always doing bad things. Not once do we see him do anything that's not just plain outright evil. And we as the audience have absolutely no reason to give a single fuck about any of what he's doing, except for how it affects Peter and Miles. And even that element of the storyline is half-baked. Craven also spends a lot of time just doing terrorism around New York City. Also, this is a nitpick, but when the fuck does the US military or the Avengers or someone step in? I mean, I get it. There's a suspension of disbelief when it comes to these things, as I've said before. But look at this! I mean, bro is literally doing domestic terrorism all over New York City, and no one seems to care except Spider-Man. Even the cops don't give a shit. By the logic of this game, Craven could blow up the Empire State Building and there would be like 2 patrol cars and a helicopter there. Now, again, this would be easier to get over if we as the audience were given a reason to care. Some reason that Craven is doing these things, but we aren't. That is until about 10 to 11 hours into the campaign, where the game finally reveals why Craven is doing this. I won't give the reason away, but to me it seems like such a half-assed reason for a bad guy to do bad guy things. Now, I can't fully fault Insomniac for this. I've never read the comics, so maybe this is a core motivation for Craven as a character. Regardless, it's dumb as fuck, and Insomniac should have come up with something better. However, Craven's not the only villain in this game. The marketing also focused heavily on Venom. 19 inches of rock-hard venom in your mouth! 19 inches of rock-hard venom in your ass! Coming inside you on October 20th, 2023! Venom in this game is the opposite of Craven. With Venom, I can say even less because the marketing around him is very coy about not revealing too much. What I can say is this. Venom is the best villain in any of these Spider-Man games, and this is coming from someone who hates this character with a passion. I hate him in Raimi's Spider-Man 3, I hate both of those dumbass, dog-ass, stupid Tom Hardy movies, and I hate every other incarnation of him I have ever seen. I think he looks cool, but I think Eddie Brock is a stupid character, and I think the concept of an alien symbiote from outer space is kinda fucking dumb. However, I absolutely loved this incarnation of the character. Insomniac's Venom keeps all of the things I like about the character, which is the design and personality. Then, they take all of the things I don't like about the character and twist them around and reframe them through a new lens into a spin on the character that's wholly unique and viscerally entertaining. Another thing that's viscerally entertaining is the gameplay in Spider-Man 2. With the core gameplay loop, Insomniac took a if it ain't broke, don't fix it approach, and I think it paid off. They kept what worked and nixed or fixed what didn't. I'll talk first about the main missions, which is where I think Insomniac made the most improvements. Most of the main story missions in Spider-Man 2 have you following Craven's trail trying to hunt the Hunter. Now, the thing about Craven is that he's on a hunt of his own. He's hunting all of the rogues that Spider-Man has fought over the years, so while you're on his tail, you'll often encounter many villains from Spider-Man's past. This is a really cool structure for missions, especially since this is a Spider-Man universe that we jumped into late. The first time we meet this version of Peter Parker, he's already in his late 20s and has fought and apprehended a lot of the famous villains from his canon. Thus, we as players never got to fight some of them. This game rectifies this issue in a big way. Almost every single rogue you can think of from Spider-Man's past that we haven't already fought makes at least a cameo appearance here. Even some villains that appeared in prior games but only briefly get a bit more time to shine here. There's one in particular that had a role in one of the DLC campaigns from Spider-Man 2018 that has a mission with Miles in this game that's just absolutely spectacular and is also in my top 5 gaming moments of the year. It's fucking immaculate, and you'll know what I mean if you play it. The missions generally follow this hunting structure until about the midpoint of the game, at which point a shift happens. This is around when Peter gets the symbiote abilities. Right here, the missions get a little bit stale. They definitely aren't bad, but you can tell that this is where Insomniac was really overly confident in their work. To be fair, the animation and artwork on display here is astonishing and feels truly next gen. This is stuff that I just don't think would be possible in the same way on a PS4. However, despite the gorgeous animations, this is around the point in the game when the combat gets a little bit stale. The combat in Spider-Man 2 is very good. Not great, not incredible, but very good. Both Miles and Peter have new sets of abilities that are mapped to L1 plus a face button. The spider gadgets also return, but this time there's a new assortment of them that are mapped to R1 plus face button. This sort of combat control scheme seems to be becoming the new norm for AAA games. It was fully on display in Final Fantasy XVI earlier this year. In Spider-Man 2, I think it's a bit more hit and miss than it was there. I think the combat feels really good at first, like spectacularly good. It's a lot like the first game, but just a bit more fluid and streamlined with some nice quality of life improvements. The game also throws in a curveball with the new parry mechanic, which allows you to parry nearly any attack from an opponent, which adds another way for you to keep that combo meter climbing. The problem isn't with what the combat itself is, but more with the way it's delivered to the player. Toward the beginning of the game, we are given a base moveset and sent on our way. We get used to what these moves do and how they work. As the game goes on, Miles is given new abilities at a piecemeal rate that keeps combat as Miles feeling fluid and fresh without overwhelming the player. You are given just the right number of options without going overboard. However, as Peter, it's a different story. After receiving his 4 base moves, Peter's moveset doesn't change until the midpoint of the game when he receives the symbiote. This would be fine if the symbiote abilities were delivered at the same rate they were delivered to Miles, but Peter gets all 4 abilities in a very short time frame. This leads to a lot of button mashing until you get comfortable with them. But right after you get comfortable with them, they are taken away and you are back to your same base moveset. But then, towards the end of the game, Peter gets access to even more new moves that do different things without ever really being given time to adjust to these varied movesets. In the end, a lot of combat scenarios started with me just spamming my abilities and gadgets, waiting for refresh timers, and repeating the process until the combat scenario ended. While it was amusing the first 100 times, thanks to the incredible animation and sound design, on that 101st time, it starts to get stale. This strategy even worked on the highest difficulty of the game for everything except boss fights. While not outright bad, this style of combat just isn't my jam. It worked in Final Fantasy XVI because I, as the player, got to pace my own build diversity and progression and was given time to get used to every ability before being given a new one. But here, it's just repetitive, dry, and spammy. Everything I've said about the combat thus far only applies to general enemy wave fights. The boss fights in this game are exceptional. In Spider-Man 2, every boss fight is incredible, truly up there with the likes of From Software and Sony Santa Monica with the design, variety of movesets, and creativity required from the player in order to beat them. These bosses do not fuck around. There's 2 in particular that I envision many players will get stuck on for a little while just because of how unrelenting they are to the player. Every boss forces you to play by their rules and adapt or die. Again, it's really hard to talk about this without spoiling anything, but trust me, they're incredible. In particular, there's one towards the end of the game in Astoria, if you know, you know, that is just so good. It has everything a good boss fight needs: tense fighting, intelligent AI, and it's all underpinned by incredibly personal stakes that tie into the narrative of the game beautifully. The only problem with any of the boss fights in this game are the arenas. Some of these bosses are really big and obtuse and storm through environments. On top of that, the Spider-Men are really fast and tend to overshoot their movement a bit. This wouldn't be that much of an issue if the boss arenas were sized accordingly, but they aren't. These boss arenas are unusually small, even for a game without such mobility in its player characters. This leads to some frustration, such as overshooting jumps or web zips and leaving the arena, or beating up on your enemies so hard that they leave the arena. It's not a massive issue, but it happened enough to get on my nerves a little bit in some of the later battles. The boss fights weren't even the most surprising part of the game though. That trophy goes to the open world. After the Miles Morales game, I did not know how many more wave-based enemy outposts I had left in me. I seriously get flashbacks just thinking about them. Thankfully, those are long gone in Spider-Man 2. Now, I don't want to give the wrong impression. A lot of the open world activities on display here are very similar to what we got to play through in 2018, but the slight adjustments made here go a long way. For instance, in Spider-Man 2018, when taking down a Kingpin base, there were multiple waves of enemies that got more crowded and deadly with each wave. This was fine the first few times, but got very annoying and repetitive in the late game. On top of those, there were Sable bases, which were essentially the same thing, but with harder enemy types. And you had to do these over and over and over again in order to attain 100% completion. In Spider-Man 2, that thankfully isn't the case. Enemy outposts still exist, but they aren't wave-based and they're blissfully short and sweet. On top of this, sometimes they'll have a twist on them that gives you a certain gameplay style you don't normally have to do. Some of them make you stealth around, others push you to go in loud and proud. The game never forces you into these playstyles, but suggests them through environmental design. It's just good game design, and I love it. Another thing I love is the traversal. No matter which way you choose to approach it, traveling around New York City is fun. There are 3 primary means of transportation: web swinging, fast traveling, and the brand new wingsuit. All 3 of these are immensely satisfying in their own way. The swinging is just as fluid as it was in 2018, but this time momentum lets you move even faster. On top of that, the animation work is just so good. I know I sound like a broken record, but seriously, Insomniac is paving new ground in the industry with the animation work in both Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart and now Spider-Man 2. The fast travel system is also industry leading. The second you hit fast travel, you are instantly thrust into an animation screen that brings you to where you want to be. The reason for this is the PS5's ability to stream assets at lightning fast rate. Insomniac actually flexes this a bit in one of the earlier boss fights in the game, where Miles is thrust all the way from one side of the city to the other in an instant. Lastly, the wingsuit is just phenomenal and also necessary. With Spider-Man 2 adding the boroughs of Queens and Brooklyn, Spider-Man needed a way to cross the river, and as much as I'd like to see Peter Parker whipping a Bentley, I don't really think it's his style. As such, Insomniac came up with the idea of adding a wingsuit and wind tunnels that allow you to quickly propel yourself all across the map. It's efficient, satisfying, and most importantly, fun. You can also seamlessly switch between swinging and gliding in your jaunts across the city, which leads to an overall cohesive traversal system that's among the best I've ever seen. Now before I close this thing out, I want to talk about spoilers. So if you haven't played Spider-Man 2, skip to the timecode on your screen to hear my final thoughts on the game. You've been warned. Alright, now that the fucking losers are gone, let's talk about the fun stuff, yeah? I want to start by talking about some plot holes I noticed in the story that just bugged me. None of them are massive or game-breaking, but there's 2 in particular that really irked me. First, after Craven kidnaps Miles in an attempt to bait Peter, he puts him in a jail cell. Then, when Miles escapes, we're just supposed to believe that Craven expected him to escape and go exactly where Craven wanted, taking out the lackeys that Craven wanted him to, in order to end up at the entrance to the Coliseum, which, you guessed it, Craven wanted him to. Then, Craven sticks Miles in the Coliseum with Martin Lee, telling them they must fight to the death. Let's play this logic out for a second. If Miles dies, what happens? Craven no longer has bait for Peter. This is bad writing. It feels like the writer got lost in a web, no pun intended, and forgot to write Martin Lee back into the story, but their entire character arc for Miles revolved around Lee, and they didn't know what to do, so they just threw some shit in there and called it a day. This felt super rushed, and I wasn't a fan of how Lee was handled in this game, or how quickly Miles just kind of got over his hatred for him. I liked where Miles as a character ended up, and I liked the core story beats of his journey. I just didn't like how it happened. The second plot hole that bugged me was towards the end of the game. When Peter, Miles, and MJ go to have their final standoff with Venom, right before MJ is about to walk into the symbiote nest, Peter is like, "Oh yeah, I made you an upgrade for your stun gun." This upgrade allows her to zap symbiotes from far away and literally just turns her into Solid Snake. My main problem with this, though I have many, is that Peter just sort of haphazardly hands it to her like it's nothing. But let's play out a scenario where MJ walks into that nest without the stun gun upgrade. Within T-minus 5 seconds, she would have gotten her shit wrecked. I mean milli-rocked. I mean murdered. brutally. I mean, this entire last part of the game with MJ in the symbiote nest is just fucking wild. It's like they were in a time crunch and didn't know how to incorporate MJ into this final climax, and we're just like, fuck it, just give her a gun and call it a day. Another part of the final act of the game I took issue with was the violence. I think if an alien symbiote the size of Venom was doing the things Venom was doing at the end of this game, the president would have called in the National Guard. Again, I get it, it's a comic book story, and I shouldn't take it that seriously. But when so much time and care goes into making this world feel real, it's really upsetting when all of that is underpinned by aspects of the plot that feel ripped right from a Saturday morning cartoon, and not the good kind. Now I want to spend a little bit more time discussing the Scream boss fight from the end of the second act. This boss fight is so good on so many levels, and I could honestly write an entire other video essay explaining the intricacies and nuances of this fight and what makes it so good, but this review is already at 15 pages, so I'll keep it brief-ish. Part of the fun of the character of Peter Parker is the personal relationship he has with a lot of his villains. The setup for this fight is perfect. Harry shows up to Peter's house in Astoria and finds MJ there alone. Harry sits there and waits for Peter to arrive as he knows Peter will show up. When Peter gets there, he tries to reason with Venom before realizing that Venom was only there to try to convince Peter to join them, using MJ as a negotiation tool. When Peter refuses, Venom/Harry turns MJ into Scream, and we are then thrust into the most violent couples therapy session the world has ever seen. Having our romantic interests in the story work out their issues in this manner is just so smart and so true to the core tendencies of Spider-Man storytelling, but not in a way that feels like we're retreading old territory. It's fresh, smart, and incredibly emotional. Throughout the entire boss battle, I had flashbacks to old fights I've had with exes and issues I've faced in both relationships and friendships, and that's the greatest compliment I can give this game. Moments like these and the Miles and Black Cat set piece really show that Insomniac has the potential to be among the best in the business. They are only held back by a few issues that remove the player from the immersion that those set pieces provide. When Insomniac was announced as the developer for Spider-Man, the world was stoked. After playing Sunset Overdrive and Ratchet & Clank 2016, there was no question that they had the chops to handle the character of Spider-Man. And the world was right. Insomniac gives Spider-Man the tender love and care that he, as a character, deserves. With 2018, they didn't do anything revolutionary. They just retreaded old and safe territory and delivered a satisfying, if repetitive, Spider-Man game. With Miles Morales, they used the same formula again to tell a slightly more personal, emotional, and fresh story. This worked incredibly well and introduced us to their rendition of the character. With Spider-Man 2, it's clear that Insomniac is making strides in the right direction in regard to compelling character writing and open world design, but for every 2 steps forward they make, they take 1 step back in regards to plot cohesion, villain writing, and combat. Also, there are some massive jumps of logic required from the player in order to fully buy into this story. Despite this, as a whole package, Spider-Man 2 delivers a very fun, open-world superhero experience that showcases Insomniac's remarkable ability to create compelling characters, best-in-class traversal mechanics and animation design, and an open world that really feels worth exploring. While I didn't absolutely adore my time with Spider-Man 2, I still liked it a lot. And I liked it even more than I liked the first 2 games, which I already thoroughly enjoyed. I just know that Insomniac has a full-on 10 out of 10 Spider-Man banger in them. That's how I felt since I played the first Spider-Man in 2018, and with every consecutive entry, it's gotten better. I just long for the day where they can showcase the high points they've shown in all 3 of these games in one cohesive experience. The traversal and open world of Spider-Man 2, the incredibly personal stakes of Miles Morales, and the streamlined, focused, and grounded plot of Spider-Man 2018. For this reason, I really hope Insomniac get another crack at this character, because I think the formula they've developed here is really special, and I really like all 3 of these games, even if I'm critical of them. I just want to love them, and my gripes with these games come from my love for and faith in Insomniac as a game studio. They're among the best out there. My final score is a 3 out of 4. Hi, I just want to say thanks for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to get more of me, go to Patreon, go to Twitter. The links are in the description. The support on Patreon means the world, and you can get your name said at the beginning of the video. You can have your name pop up in the credits of this video. Anything you want, it's yours over on Patreon. That's not true, but you know what I mean. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell. I really appreciate it. Bye.